All right. So first, thank you all for coming. My name is, for those of you who don't know me, I mean, I know most of the people in here right now. My name is Sean Astorga. I am a physical therapist and strength coach in North New Jersey. And I'm the owner of And Performance Rehab, which is run out of Chester at a gym called Bolt Fitness and Performance Training. And right now, we are obviously doing all of our sessions virtually, given everything that is going on in the world. And a lot of common things have come up, which is what kind of spurred this presentation. And while most people that are coming to see us are reaching out because they have pain or injury or something like that that's limiting them from doing the things that they enjoy doing in life, a lot of similar topics surrounding the uncertainty that's going on right now keep popping up. And we have been helping people kind of like organize their lifestyle in a way that allows them to continue to kind of focus on their health and figure out how to schedule times to make sure things are kind of going according to plan there. So structured chaos is a term that you don't really hear too much. I thought I made it up, but apparently it is a thing. But essentially what it is it describes a situation where a person sets up their life in a way that allows them to thrive when things get a little crazy. When like a quarantine hits, it doesn't really throw them off track. And you can see this really well in like the athletic world. I know some of you are strength coaches. So if you think about like a player who does really well in practice when things are regimented and scheduled and it's kind of according to a plan, but then when they get into a game setting, they're not able to perform well versus like someone like LeBron James who can perform well under any circumstance. So the goal of the presentation today is to kind of give you a framework that you can apply to your life in your day where you can kind of set yourself up for success when things get a little bit crazy. So, oh, how do you go to the next slide? There it is. So just a little bit about myself. This slide, I mean, 4 pictures really kind of sums up my professional career. I started out working on Wall Street and then in the finance world for 7 years. My degrees are in economics and finance. And then ultimately I went back to school to become a physical therapist and strength coach. And I had the opportunity to work with a lot of professional athletes right after graduating for the first, actually the majority of my career as a PT. And I'm talking like NFL players, Olympic athletes, Olympic figure skating, Olympic weightlifting, professional rugby, UFC, professional martial arts, like those types of things. And then while my career was kind of going pretty well, I suffered an injury that kind of turned the world upside down a little bit, hence the name of the presentation. But ultimately, all of these things are what led me to making AMP a thing. And then just going along those, the theme of experience, these are the 3 people who professionally have really helped me the most, kind of refine just the model that I view healthcare in, and also I guess my life, to be frank. But Ben House is the person who, and we're going to get into like the injury and all that kind of stuff and why it's relevant, but he is the person who really, when the traditional medical world kind of failed me, he is the person who helped me get things back on track. And a lot of the things that he taught me are what I try to do and teach other people to do for themselves. Bill Hartman is a physical therapist out of Indianapolis. And I mean, he's probably like the biggest mentor that I have in terms of physical therapy, because he is somebody who really challenged me to come up with principles that are important to myself. And to create a model based off of those principles so that I can help other people, again, do those types of things for themselves. And then lastly is Craig. It's like weird to say, but he's probably the least well-known person on this list, given the people I know who follow me. But he's been doing what he does for a very, very long time, like decades. And he's a chiropractor in Los Angeles. And what I really like about Craig's approach, and what I, again, try to do in how I approach healthcare, is teach people a sustainable health. Meaning, right, there's an issue right now, and especially in the US, where we have a situation where our lifespan is growing. Right, we have technology and healthcare can keep us alive for a very long time, but our actual health span is going the other way. it's getting lower. And health span would be defined as the number of years we have on the planet where we're able to do things that are meaningful to ourselves, right? Like that could be as simple as going for walks and exercising. It could be traveling. It could be whatever. And then lastly, of course, is my wife. So she is, she's the reason that I'm a PT, the reason that, AMP is even a thing. And if it was not for her, I honestly would probably be just talking about how much I hate working in finance. So, all right. So we will get into things now. My journey kind of changed a little bit after I suffered a brain injury 3 years ago. And what happened was I was at work and I was making coffee and I had my head looking down and there were two boxes that were stacked above me that fell and hit me in the back of the head. And obviously like that is not a good combination. But what happened is I was actually kind of progressing normally for the first like 3 or 4 weeks after the injury, and things were kind of going according to plan. I was kind of back to training, back to treating patients, back to coaching, back to doing a lot of the things that I really cared about. And then one day I just wasn't able to do those things again, and no one could really give me a reason why. So I kind of was spun around like the medical system for a pretty long time. And I would literally go anywhere that a specialist told me to go, like vestibular therapy, physical therapy, cognitive therapy, all these different types of things. And I just kept getting the same answers, that my story didn't make sense. And that's kind of when I found Ben. And he is, I heard him speaking on a podcast about prolonged concussion symptoms. And he talked about something called acute stress disorder, which essentially is a situation where your internal environment in your body is not able to tolerate all of the things that are happening in your world around you. And getting that system to regulate itself and back on track is really the key to understanding recovery from brain injury, but also just general health, because what may or may not know is that uncontrolled stressors are really the underlying thing in all non-communicable diseases. Communicable, that's a hard word to say, meaning things that are not contagious, right? So we're talking like blood pressure, high cholesterol, we're talking like stroke, those types of things. So after I met with Ben, this is literally what he had me work on and had me do. And what's important, I won't sit here and like read these things to you because it's not really the point. But what is important is to notice like really what's not on this list. Like there's no like fancy medications, right? There's no, he literally like from his office in Costa Rica, which is where it was at the time, told me that I need to be eating more food, doing things like meditate and restorative yoga to help my body to calm back down, and like general exercise, right? And this thought process really kind of changed how I view healthcare, because I think a lot of times in healthcare, we're going to a doctor with the mindset that they are going to do something to fix us, right? Give us a medication, when the reality is, and what I hope you can get out of this presentation as we go through, is that a lot of the things that we can be doing are stuff that we need to be doing consistently, and we can do them ourselves. We don't need someone to be telling us to do them. But this essentially changed the course of my education. And although I still am a physical therapist, I spend the vast majority of my time learning about the effects of stress and uncontrolled stress, especially on the human body. And I put these resources here so you can see them now, but don't worry about them. There's a resource section at the end here, so I'll make sure you have all the information. But what's important to understand is our ability to leverage certain things is what is going to be helpful going forward if we're looking at a lifelong health, and our ability to do things that are relevant for a very long time. So it is important to know kind of where we come from, right? If we're going to understand why some of these things are important. So our biology, right, the things that make us who we are and the things that determine what we need as human beings really comes from our ancestors, like talking millions and millions of years ago. This would be things like getting, I mean, we're going to go over them in the next slides, like things like sunlight and nutrition and physical activity and those types of things. But the problem is that while like our modern life is great, a lot of it does not support the need for some of the things that we're going to speak about. So there is that disconnect. So these are, you know, and again, I'm not going to read them all to you here, but these are some of the things that are in our power, in our control, that if we plan for and make sure we incorporate into our lives, that we can have a significant impact in how we feel in general. And if you see down here, this stress, like I think the word stress gets like a very negative, is a very negative connotation associated with it, because there are such things as good stressors. But what is important to know is that all of these other boxes, I don't know how many are there, what is that, 12 boxes? So the other 11 boxes, if you are doing things to address all of these other things, your ability to tolerate minor stressors or even more significant stressors goes up big time. So that doesn't even really become an issue. This is just another representation of it. I like it because it's an acronym, so it's easy to remember. And actually there is, they've added an S right on the bottom there for sugar. But these are all things, again, right? Smoking, nutrition, alcohol, physical activity, stress and sleep. And then the last S that is not here, I guess that's the bonus you guys get for being here, is that is sugar, meaning like your ability to regulate sugar, right? So we know that these things, obviously there's not one thing on here that is not in your power to control. So keeping those things in mind, I really like this concept and visual of the stress bucket. It is adapted from psychological research, but it really applies to just us in general as humans. Just need a sip real quick. I'm not used to talking this much. So the stress bucket is essentially represents our tolerance to or ability to cope with the things that life throws at us, right? So when we look at the top here, it's a little blurry. Essentially these things that are filling the bucket, these things are the things that we talked about here, right? These are the things that we talked about on this slide here. And while the size of the bucket is important, what matters probably a little bit more is our ability to keep the bucket full, meaning that we're doing enough of the good things, right? Like eating enough of like the right nutrients and food amounts, right? Sleeping enough on a consistent basis, doing enough physical activity on a consistent basis, that we don't have to worry about the things that really are draining from us. You can see the things on the bottom there that are draining. It's a little, I don't know what you call that thing, a little spout. So theoretically, right, if you are consistently refilling this bucket, those things that drain from us have less of the ability to affect us in a bad way. The problem is we have this big quarantine missile that kind of hit a lot of us. And now there is this probably larger hole draining from our bucket because there is a lot of uncertainty around the things that we normally would be doing. Some people don't know what their job situation is going to be like in a few weeks if things, whenever things go back to normal. So this is a huge, huge drain on people right now, but luckily we have the time to focus on all of the things that are keeping the bucket full. So I really like this quote. Tim Gabbett is a sports scientist, and I'm going to say a doctor of exercise physiology. I'm not sure exactly what he's a doctor of, but it's PhD. Very smart guy. And this is in reference to sports-related injuries, but it really applies to us in general as humans. And I'll read the quote to you. It's not the load that breaks the individual down. It's the load they are not prepared for. Meaning, if you are not prepared for a big-time stressor, right, your bucket is consistently on empty, and then you are hit with something that adds to that total load on a person, that's when people have really bad things happen. That's when people have like your heart attack. That's when people have a lot of, or it could be even, that's when people have like their sports-related injuries. So something with the body is not ready to tolerate, and then you add extra load on top of it is usually when negative stuff happens. So our goal is, how do we make that not happen? So when we're talking about load, I just put these in here to bring it back to the beginning a little bit. I did not plan for the boxes to fall on my head, and my body clearly was not ready to recover from that situation. Just like none of you probably planned for a pandemic, and now that's, I mean, shitstorm's the word that comes to mind. I don't know if that's like a professional thing to say, but like a lot of people's worlds are kind of turned upside down because their systems may not be in place to course correct. So this quote here is often attributed to James Clear. He's very big in the habit formation world, and he has a book called Atomic Habits that is very, very good, but Aristotle is where it really came from. We are the sum of our actions, and therefore our habits make all the difference. So the easiest thing to think of, right, is like lifting weights, right? You don't lift a weight one time and then you get like bigger biceps. You lift a weight a lot of times over time and you get bigger biceps, right? You don't gain 50 pounds from eating one donut. You gain 50 pounds from eating donuts, right, over time. So the purpose of this slide is just to understand that the things that we are doing consistently, right? So if we are consistently getting enough sleep, right, we're consistently making sure we're eating enough food and exercising and doing a lot of those things, when bad stuff happens, our body's really prepared to tolerate it. So the term anti-fragile is what I think most of us need to strive for. Anti-fragile, and again, this book is referenced in the end here, so you can get it. But anti-fragile is a term that describes something that when a stress is applied to it, it actually gets better from the stress. It gets stronger. It gets, whatever the word might be, it gets better. And the cool thing about humans is that we are the most adaptable creature in the world. This is obvious because we have been in existence for millions and millions of years. And humans have the capability of becoming anti-fragile. So anti-fragile, an easy example to see, again, I'm going to go back to lifting weights because lifting weights is something that I think a lot of people can relate to. When you first start lifting weights, maybe you can only lift 10 pounds. And then over time, you consistently are lifting weights. Now you can lift 50 pounds. In 1 year, maybe you can lift 80 pounds. I don't know what the progression would be for a person. But essentially what's happening is your body is responding to that stress of lifting weights by getting stronger, right? Your bones get stronger, your joints get stronger, your muscles get stronger, and they grow in response to that stimulus. You can even see this with people who have osteoporosis. And I'm going to keep using the weight example, but people who have osteoporosis, that's a change in the density of their bones. When they start lifting weights, you see these numbers improve. And then maybe they don't have osteoporosis after a year. They have osteopenia, or they don't have any symptoms or any issues at all in that sense. So anti-fragile would be on the far end of one end of the spectrum. Fragile would be on the other end of the spectrum. So fragile would be a situation where the easiest, you can see the picture of the cup here. You have a glass and you drop the glass on the floor, right? The stress of hitting the floor is going to cause the glass to break. So just like a human has the ability to become anti-fragile, we also have the ability to become very fragile. I would argue that I was very fragile when I first got injured, and the doctors that were helping me, I think they were doing what they thought was best, but they were taking me away from doing things that were helping me get better, and they were making me afraid to kind of live my life. So I would argue that I was fragile in that sense. Another example of being fragile, and not to be like, kill the mood here, would be like a human getting hit by like a bus, right? Like their body is just, their bones are going to break in that situation, right? So we have a spectrum here, and we really have the ability to end up on the anti-fragile side of things, both mentally, physically, and emotionally, if we just put in some work. So now we are going to get into what we do about all of these things. So the Eisenhower matrix, also called the urgent important matrix, you may have seen it called that. So this is a way that in the productivity or like time management circle, this is something that's kind of like, I'll say it's the gold standard. There might be other deviations of it. I'm going to kind of walk you through what these quadrants mean and show you some examples of them. And what we're going to really focus on is how to apply this quadrant to making sure that we are doing the things that are important to us for our long-term health. So quadrant 1 is the urgent and important things. So these are the things you have to do right now. So this would be like an emergency, right? Like you fall and you break your leg, you have to go to the emergency room right now. So no matter what you had on your schedule, that gets pushed aside. We're doing these things, right? You have a pipe burst in your basement. You got to take care of it. Otherwise, your house will flood. We even had at our house the other day, we had a situation where I'm reading in the morning and I hear some scratching in the wall. And then like 20 minutes later, we see a squirrel sticking his head through. And then, you know, the whole day kind of went away because we had to focus on, all right, how do we get this hole patched up and these squirrels out of our house? Quadrant 2 is the most important quadrant in terms of planning. This is where we plan for all of our long-term things, right? So from like a business standpoint, this is where I would do all of my planning for AMP, right? From a health standpoint, this is where I'm going to plan my exercise, my sleep schedule, like all of those types of things. The thing about this quadrant, right? So it's important, not urgent, is the fact that it's not urgent is that it's very easy to ignore these things, right? It's very easy to get caught up doing other things and be like, okay, maybe I'll just exercise tomorrow, or maybe I'll just stay up a little later tonight and watch this television show. So quadrant 2 is really, as we go through the rest of this here, is what we're going to kind of hammer home, and how to obviously like optimize that. Quadrant 3 is down here in the bottom left, is urgent and not important. So these are things that are usually important for other people, right? Like a good example that I always think of is when you get a text message. You get a text message that is important for that other person, and you're going to go answer that text message, so it's drawing your attention away. When in reality, if someone's texting you, it's probably not really that important to answer in the moment. You could probably put your phone to the side and continue focusing on some other stuff. And quadrant 4 is the last one. And again, this is an obvious one, but not important, not urgent. So these are also things that kind of, I'm going to call them time wasters, but I don't think that that's really the best word, because they're really like entertainment type things, right? So like watching television, right? Playing on Instagram and scrolling through Facebook, like that type of stuff. So it's stuff that we all do, and it's important for us to like disconnect. But if it's taking time away from doing other things, then that's where we get into trouble. So this is that exact same thing I just showed you, but there are some examples here. I just put this here. You guys will have access. I'll email you all the presentation, just so you have an idea of what are some things that might fall into these quadrants. And again, if we think of quadrant 2 here as this is the most important in terms of any type of planning, any type of thing that we need to plan for. Is it okay to skip, or are you guys reading? Shouldn't ask questions when I have you all muted. No one can answer me. All right, we'll go to the next one here. So again, I really obviously just want to hammer this point home. Most of us are quadrant 1, 3, and 4. And where we should be is a lot of quadrant 2. Oh man, I'm really driving this home. Forgot I made so many of the same slide. And again, this one has red arrows, so you know it's important. We are talking about prioritizing the things here in quadrant 2 are the things that are going to keep the bucket full. So if we look at quadrant 2 as our long-term plan, we need to think of our body as a long-term project, right? And our physical, mental, and emotional health are the things that I'm really talking about in that regard, because the things that we do to make those things better, they're not magic, right? They don't, it's not like we just like meditate one day and our like mental health is better, right? It's things that we do consistently, right? Like Aristotle said, consistently over time is what is important. Even John Mayer said it here. You know, if he said it, it's true. So now what do we do about it? So like I said, right, prioritizing quadrant 2 is going to be what I think can be the most impactful for people. So this is the kind of process that I would take someone through. And these are not questions that I can answer for a person, right? You can only answer them for yourself. So I'll kind of walk you through it. But again, this is something that if like you find value in doing these things, this is something that I would, how I would approach it. So first, you're going to be identifying things that are urgent that you are routinely doing, right? This would be your quadrant 1, quadrant 3. Obviously, some of the things in quadrant 1, nothing we can do about them, right? So we can't stress about it. If it happens, we have to take care of it, and we take care of it. There's no point of getting frustrated, angry for a long period of time about it. It is what it is. But there are situations where things become urgent that don't need to be urgent, right? So an example would be, like I knew for a week and a half I was going to do this presentation. If I had procrastinated doing this presentation and then this morning came and I didn't have any slides prepared, right? That becomes a urgent activity for me now. It becomes quadrant 1. It becomes very stressful for me because now I'm like, oh crap, I have 18 people signed up for this and I have nothing prepared. I'm going to look like an idiot. So I have to drop everything and focus on that. So that's more what I'm talking about in this situation. If we can identify those things and understand or plan for ways that we can prevent these things from becoming urgent, then we have an action step, right? We can put these into our planning phase in quadrant 2. So we can schedule it into our day-to-day activities and not make it a stressful situation. Ooh. Finding time for quadrant 2. So I'm going to show you, like, again, later in this presentation, some of how I schedule my day. It's going to seem like it's very, very rigid, but it really, really is not. And I think the biggest thing is prioritizing Q2 items in your schedule. So what this would mean is we need to take all of those time-wasting activities or entertainment activities or things that aren't really helping us reach our long-term goals and put them into a separate time, right? So we know quadrant 4, right? Looking on Instagram, Facebook, watching TV, like I do all those things, but I do them throughout the day at different times. So I would schedule a block of time to answer messages I get on Instagram, or like Sarah and I, my wife and I, we might have time scheduled in the afternoon or at night to watch TV together. So I'm not saying don't do those things. Do them, just make sure you're there, they work with your schedule in terms of what's important. Quadrant 3. So stop doing quadrant 3 activities during your scheduled time for quadrant 2. This one's hard. And something that I do is, especially is if I'm doing work, especially working for like AMP or something where I need to be in deep thought, the second I get a text message, it's going to pull me away from that. Right. And then if it's someone that, like one of my friends, and then we end up having a conversation, texting back and forth for 30 minutes, that's really 30 minutes of time that I didn't get to use towards something that was important for me to get done. So now that becomes a stressor for me. It's something that becomes a little frustrating for me. And the reality is, especially with texting, right? If something's important, they're going to call you, right? They're not going to be texting you for something that's urgent. So having, again, batching time in your day to schedule those things is super helpful. And then I just said, yeah, number 3 there, batch time to perform Q3 and Q4 activities. And this is kind of just like a recap of everything here. Some of the action steps, again, that I think it's probably helpful for you to go through. But the first step is identifying the things in quadrant 2 that are important for you, right? So identifying the things that, if like feeling good in your long-term health is something that's important to you, like ask yourself honest questions, right? Like, what do I need to do to make this happen? And then you need to prioritize those things. Same thing if you have a business, right? You need to prioritize your day. What are the things that are most important for me to do, and how do I make them happen? And then you plan for them. Q1 and Q3 activities that you frequently do. This is important to do. Again, obviously certain emergencies we can't do anything about. Things happen. But there are certain things, like I mentioned before, like procrastination, right? Where if you had just planned ahead for it, it no longer becomes an urgent activity. It becomes something that you can just gradually work towards. And you can still focus on all the other things that are important in your life. And then lastly is Q4 activities, right? Your entertainment, your Instagram, you're watching TV, all of those types of things. Netflix, there are tons of great shows. Ozark season 3, highly recommended. But if you're watching these things in the middle of your day when you're trying to do work, probably not an efficient use of time. And while I would love to just binge watch a show all day, if maintaining a certain lifestyle is important to me, then I'm going to not be doing that. And I'll have scheduled time throughout later in the day to take care of those things. So, oh yeah, I put this slide in here just to remind people that what works for me is not going to work for you. So you're going to see a sample of kind of what my day looks like in my schedule. But it's not something to compare yourself to or to try to strive for. Because this, again, it works for me and it's not necessarily for everybody. But so big rocks here, right? These would be me identifying things in Q2 that are important to me, right? So I listed these things out and I plan for them during my day. So I put just like a sample schedule. It's pretty consistent for me. And the goal, right, for me is, one, I've seen what it feels like to not feel anywhere near your best after I got injured. And obviously I never want to do that again. But I find that I feel best when I do all of these things, right? Meditating is sometimes like a little too woo-woo for people. So they like, don't force yourself to do it if it doesn't work, right? But again, this is, yeah, just a sample. And you'll see here as I go through, like I have the time in here to do the things that are like watching TV, right? Or those types of things, right? So the important thing is to understand is that these types of situations are going to be highly individualized, right? And if you know, like for example, I have on here number 6, alcohol or lack of, like, I know that if I drink alcohol, that my next day I'm going to probably feel like not the greatest, right? So I have to be okay with the consequence of that. And at least I wrote that on my list because now I'm aware of the decision when I make it. Like, oh, if I'm going to have 2 glasses of wine with dinner, I might have a headache when I wake up tomorrow. Am I okay with that? I can ask the question. But again, just prioritizing your day with what works for you. So some take-home things here. So like I said before, this looks very rigid, but it's really not. And I think having a focus to your day helps clear headspace for you, and it helps keep your priorities in check. So you make sure that you're hitting all the things that matter. And a lot of times, obviously, if you schedule way too many things in your day and you're like blocking out time every 15 minutes, like you're kind of missing the point here, because that would make stuff very rigid, and then there's no way that it's realistic. But if you block out like an hour and a half to do something or 2 hours to do something, right, it's a very different look and feel than if you're doing something blocking out every 15, 20 minutes. So keeping the bucket full is, again, that's a priority for me. I'm not saying it needs to be a priority for you, but understanding that your long-term health and outcome of your health, as you go through the years of your life, is going to be highly, highly dependent on the things that are happening right now. So the things that I'm doing now on a consistent basis, well, fingers crossed, I'm hoping are setting me up for success when I'm 50, 60, 70 years old. And I'm still able to do all the things that are very important for me, like staying physically active and all those types of things. And then lastly here, of course, right, like you're still going to struggle with things, right? Like the quarantine hit and there was like a day or two where I'm like, what the hell am I going to do? I just opened a business and it's an in-person business. I literally work one-on-one with people in person, and now I can't do that. How am I going to make money? How am I going to get income? Like all of those thoughts still went through my head. But the point is that at least my situation, I feel like my bucket is always on the fuller side of things. And I was able to kind of bounce back pretty quickly. It's a cute picture. Hell yeah. So these are just some resources. That was really the end of any of the content here. These are just some of the resources. These are books that I highly recommend. They are not like, there's not too medical, there's not too much jargon in there. I think that even like the Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers is a really, really good book. There's a little science in it, but I think that he does a good job of explaining things in a way that's easy to understand. And then I just wrote down the practitioners that I had mentioned earlier. I don't think I mentioned Seth Oberst. Seth Oberst is a physical therapist. I believe he's in Georgia, but he works a lot in the realm of trauma and people with chronic pain, and the relationship of how like maybe like something that happened in their childhood is restricting them from like living their lifestyle that they want to live. Super interesting stuff. But he has a lot of good resources on his blog here, and a lot of very good reading list. You'll probably see all of these books on his reading list. But if this is a topic that is of interest to you and you want to learn more, I would say that he is the person that I would go reference. And I think that's it. Oh, lastly, while I have people here, I should just tell you what we are doing at AMP. Because again, I can't see people in person. We are seeing them virtually. And I really believe it's a good deal for people financially, because it's 40% of our in-person price. You're getting the same type of service. Obviously, it is run in the same way that I'm doing this little talk here right now. So what we are doing is anything it really depends on the person, right? So anything physical therapy, fitness and performance related. And what we've been getting a lot into with clients is lifestyle management, which is really what we kind of talked about today, is prioritizing your day. In terms of the physical therapy, these sessions aren't like your traditional, what you see in person where you go somewhere for three times a week for what seems like the rest of your life. These are, it's very action oriented and need specific. And it's kind of catered towards your goal, right? I have people that I see one time and I set them up with a program and that's it. I have people that I train consistently. So it really can be whatever we need to make it. And then what I want to do for the people who are on here today, unless you are a current client, I can't see the whole list here, is for the first 3 people that reach out, we're going to do the first session completely free, just so you can get an experience of what we are talking about. And also it just helps us get our name out there and those types of things. And we really are just trying to help as many people as we can. And I think that's it. Oh, and then there's just some contact information for you all. Website, you can email me at right here, Sean@amperformancerehab.com. You can text me at the number below. And yeah, the website's all there. And I really think that was it now. Yep, that's the last one. So I don't know the best way to take questions if there are any. Maybe a chat box. Oh, yep, chat box. Oh, we got a taker. Colin, I got you, man. Are there any questions or anything along those lines about anything I talked about? I feel like I talk fast, so I might have glazed over some things. Don't take offense. You can, I don't know the best way. Write it in the chat.
I think that this is because I came in a little late because I thought this started at 2:30.
Oh, Colin.
But with the Eisenhower matrix, your quadrant 1 is things you got to do that are important and urgent. And your example was like the squirrels in your house. Like that's got to be gone, right? That's got to get taken care of. And then Q2 would be like, like for example, I need to write 2 programs for my clients today. So like that stuff I got to get done. Like to me, it's important to meditate so that I can help to cultivate more focus, and then like all the like neural health benefits and the emotional benefits. Like it's important that I make time to eat my own food. Like that's all my Q2 stuff.
100%. Yeah.
And Q3 could be like, well, I could ask my roommates to do their chores so I don't have to clean up extra. Or like, let's say I get a text from a friend and they need to know something from me, but it's not necessarily something that's like high on my list to do, but it draws my attention away. And then Q4 is all my mindlessly browsing on Twitter for 2 hours accidentally stuff.
Nailed it, man. And then you can even think of like programming for your clients, right? Say you wait till the last minute, right? You didn't put that in quadrant 2. Then that becomes a quadrant 1 urgent thing. Got to get it done right now or you're going to lose 2 clients.
Got it. It's a good thing I got that done this morning.
Yeah. Keep it in quadrant 2, man. You'll be feeling a lot better. Are there any other questions, concerns, feedback, anything along those lines? You can just unmute yourself. There's not too many people in here, so. All right, well, yeah, thank you all for your time. I will I have all your email addresses, so I'm going to send you all this information. I'll give you a recording of the presentation. If you really enjoy hearing me speak, you can, I don't know, listen to it before you go to bed or something. And I'll also give you a hard copy of the slides so you have them. So if you didn't take notes and you forgot about something, it'll be on there. And if you are going through things in the future, don't hesitate. You can, if something wasn't clear or you think it made sense to you now as we're talking about it, but you're reviewing the notes and you have a question, just shoot me an email or you could text me at the number that is on there. So yeah, thank you all for coming. I'm going to figure out how to close this meeting now, and I will talk to you all soon.